Ryan here with Prudential Pest Solutions, and in this video I'm going to show you how we get bats out of a house that was in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is in Berks County in Southeastern Pennsylvania. Now if you're interested in how we more specifically get bats out, or how bats typically find their ways into homes, I have a whole nother video that just goes through that and how bats get into homes and a little background on bat work in general. But for this specific video I'm going to show you the bats that were getting into this house in Reading and how we got them out. So as we're looking here, there's obviously a lot of areas in the front of the house where there's dormer windows, meat, and also on the side of the house there's brick. And whenever you have brick on the side of a house, bats can easily grip onto that and scoot under the fascia board. And in this case, that fascia trim board had a really good sized gap over top. So what we need to do is we need to eliminate all the openings around the house, leaving just one bat cone. And what that bat cone does is we install it over the opening once everything else is sealed up, and it allows the bats to leave the structure but not return. So we're essentially changing the locks on them, but it only works if we find every other possible and probable bat entrance around the house. So in this case here, it was a 2-story home all the way up to 3 stories, so we need to be able to seal up all the way up to the chimney line and down. And you can see here that we're just using it's a black hard-forming non-expansion foam. It works really well. See, bats, unlike squirrels and mice, will not chew to get into a structure. They're just going to exploit an opening that's already there. So we can use foam, inject it into the gaps and crevices, and create a really good seal that's going to keep bats out permanently. Because like I said, they're not going to chew through it. And then the black color, as opposed to the bright orange or the bright yellow expansion foam you'd see at the hardware store, is that when we're working really high and in cracks and crevices, the black really blends in great. So you can use caulk, but for some of these gaps that are this big, you're going to go through a tube of caulk pretty quick. So we like to use this black, low expansion, hard forming foam, and we can seal up every nook and cranny around the house. And you can see that, like I said, in this case here, we're going to need ladders that go all the way up. And my little joke when we were out there is, if your bats are up high, we have ladders that can touch the sky. I mean, not really, but we can get up 50 plus feet. And then if you have a structure that's even higher than that, we can rent a lift and do those sorts of things to have access to it. So like I said, the key on this job and any bat job is going to be to find any and all openings that bats are currently using or that they could use to get into a house. And we're going to eliminate those, leaving the one opening that we're going to install that bat cone on. Now, how long do we leave that bat cone on for? Well, bats are wild animals, so there's no good rhyme or reason. I typically leave them on for at least a week because, again, the bats need food, so they're going to leave the house to get food, and that's when they're going to go through that cone and not be able to get back in. So typically we'll make sure that all the bats are out of there by doing one of a few things, really. So we'll see if the homeowner continues to hear activity after a week or two. If they no longer hear activity and we no longer see evidence on the inside, then we'll remove the cone and close it up. If we have access to the attic space, we're going to treat those droppings where we're going to remove them, and then we're going to see if any new droppings come back, because that'll be a good indication if there's still bats in the property. Now, in this particular house, there was no access to the crawl space or the attic, and because there's no damage to the drywall from the droppings, we're just going to leave whatever's in there in there. All right. If there was access to the attic or crawl space, we would disinfect and clean up those droppings using a HEPA filter vacuum, because there's a mold spore that grows on these droppings that can cause some serious health risks to humans. So we want to ensure that that stuff stays doesn't become airborne and become an inhalation hazard. Now, the last thing that we do after we get all the bats out is we're going to do a chemical treatment on the inside of the house to treat for bat bugs. And bat bugs are the direct cousin of bed bugs. They feed on bats. They're blood-feeding insects. And guess what happens when the bats leave? When we get them out of the house, they don't just disappear, those bat bugs. No, they can come into the house to look for food. So we're going to seal the bats out. We're going to evict them. We don't kill bats. We're going to evict them. And then we're going to provide a chemical barrier so that any pests associated with the bat infestation does not come into the home. So this is, like I said, a very brief discussion on how we got bats out of this house in Reading, Pennsylvania. If you're interested, we have a whole nother video where we just show all the areas and potential areas around a typical home where bats get in and the whole bat removal process. So if you have bats, I'd love to have a conversation with you. So give us a call at 484-401-4361.